Hey, what's going on, good people? Welcome to Russ Can Fly, another Wednesday edition. Russ, what's up? Okay, so I know these Wednesday editions are getting crazy, but I don't want to mix the flying videos with some of these ideas I keep getting, and I'm just so obsessed with this aviation stuff, things keep coming up. So I got this interesting question about the FAA written exam, and I realized that I did not do a written exam debrief like I did for the actual practical test or the check ride. And so I thought, you know what, that's a great idea. Now, unfortunately, it won't be as fresh because it's been a while since I took the written, but I still thought since I was asked to make a debrief for the written, I would do that. So that's why I decided to do yet another Wednesday edition, because I just thought, listen, if folks in the community want certain things to be made as a video, then I'm gonna do it, because that's the whole point. You learn, I learn, we learn, all of that good stuff. So let's get to it. Okay, so since this was requested and it is really windy out here and a little chilly, I'm not gonna be before you long. I'm just gonna do 3 things that I think is important to think about as you get ready to take the FAA written exam. These are 3 things that I think will make the difference between what happened when I failed the exam the first time and when I passed the exam the second time. Yes, the first time I took the FAA written exam, I failed. I had a 67% and you need at least a 70%. Now, and of course there's other videos in there showing me basically failing and passing. But more importantly, I was so disappointed because one of the things that, and this is going to be my first point, is I didn't really understand how to take the test itself. I knew that it was going to be on a computer. I knew that it was going to be multiple choice, but I didn't understand the mechanics of the actual exam. And the reason why I didn't is because I had not picked up this book yet. And yes, I'm going to show you this book again. You're going to be like, this book again? Yep, because it is just too important and you should have it. And now I know I've talked about this book a number of times, and I've talked about it a number of times because it is a very important book and an extremely useful must-have tool. If you are a Part 61 pilot and you're going to be getting your private pilot license or private pilot certificate, you absolutely must have this book. This is the certification standards for your check ride, and I've talked all about that in the debrief. But believe it or not, there are some key things in this book that will actually help you with how to take the exam. I completely missed a couple of questions just because I had not purchased this book prior to taking the written exam. And had I looked at some of the helpful tips in this book, I would have known how to take the exam, which is just as important as knowing the material and answering the questions. And I'll show you why right now. Now, one of the things in this book is that it has a lot of knowledge test procedures and tips. These appendices are very helpful, and this is something that you definitely should use. Of course, it has all of the stuff in terms of accepted materials, unaccepted materials, blah, blah, blah. But this test tips thing was like huge, and I'm gonna tell you why. I'm gonna go over to this bullet here, and this bullet I'm gonna read in full because it's very key. For questions involving use of a graph, you may request a printed copy that you can mark in computing your answer. This copy and all other notes and paperwork must be given to the testing center upon completion of the test. Now, the reason why that particular bullet is so powerful, they were definitely going to purposefully try to trick you. They would have a couple questions where the answers would be very close to one another. So at the testing center, they give you a book, and they give you like a clear sheet of plastic and a dry erase marker and a dry eraser. I had no idea what that dry eraser was for, what the marker was for, what the clear sheet of plastic was for. None of that. Now see, therein lies my problem. had I read that bullet, I would have understood that's where I could mark to do that graph so that I could be very precise. And so rather than trying to eyeball the graphs, like, when you have to complete, you'll have a question about clearing a 50-foot obstacle, but you have to go up to a certain temperature, and then you have to go over, then you might have to go down along a curve, then go back up. I just tried to eyeball that because I didn't understand why they had given me that clear sheet of plastic in the marker. I had no idea, so I never used it. And so instead of being precise in my answers, I basically tried to eyeball it. Since they know that people are probably going to be trying to eyeball the answers, they'll put two answers that are close together. So rather than use the equipment that was given to me, I was just trying to eyeball it, and I got those questions wrong. And so that's why having that ACS book is so important, because it's going to give you very useful tips on how to take the exam. My first bit of advice would be to pick up the ACS standards book and read those appendices. It's going to give you a whole lot of very good and pertinent information on how to take the test, which is just as important as knowing the stuff. Because if you know the stuff, but you don't understand the mechanics of how to take that test, like using the tools, using the clear plastic to make sure that you're precise in making your lines so that you can get the correct answer, then you're going to get those questions wrong, even if you know the material. And that would be sad, to get something wrong that you really do know. All right, so that's my first tip. Get the ACS book or any other book and know how to take the exam. Now, my second point may be obvious, but it really does make a difference. Now, I had a real kind of, I want to understand how everything works type of thing, but there was definitely areas that I struggled. Specifically, I can remember a couple of weight and balance questions that I really just didn't understand. And unfortunately, because of that, I kind of avoided it. I really struggled with weight and balance knowledge because it just wasn't coming natural to me, especially when you were looking at the charts and you had to do kind of like half, like, decimal places and stuff. Decimals, really? Back to that? Yes. So because I was struggling with it, I oftentimes kind of glazed over because, rather than digging in. So it goes without saying that if there is an area that you're struggling in, those are questions you should go to repeat. And then anything that you have issues with, then you go back to your study materials, and then you go back to the questions, and then you go back to your study materials. Don't try to just glaze over or just have a general idea about a certain, area. Make sure you understand it, because again, there may be 3 or 4 different questions that ask about the same material 3 or 4 different ways. And if you don't have a solid foundation in that area, you're going to get 3 or 4 questions wrong, unless you guess one right. And you don't want to get into a point where you're guessing. And that's what did happen to me. I was weak on weight and balance, and I was a little shaky on cloud clearances in controlled airspace. And I figured, what I'll do is, when I go in there, yeah, I'm a little shaky, but I'll be able to do the eliminate a question and then take a 50-50 chance and all of that. Well, that strategy resulted in a 67% and a failure. So that's not something that you want to do. If you're shaky on the cloud clearances and controlled airspace, study the material. Get it solid. Then do some of the questions. If it's still not solid, then go back and study some more. Come up with different mnemonics. Find different ways to try to memorize the material. Because listen, you want to know it. If you are flying VFR, you need to know that if you're in Class Echo airspace, what the cloud clearances are around, because if you don't know it while you're on the ground and you do something wrong up in the air, it could be really bad for you, another airplane, or you could be jeopardizing your licensure. So in essence, don't wing it. Don't think that you're gonna be able to eliminate an answer on the test and figure it out as you go along. That's not a good strategy. You're gonna get yourself in trouble. Plus, like I said, each section is going to be asking multiple questions about a particular subject area. So if you're weak in that subject area, you could get those 3, 4, 5, 7 questions wrong. And trust me, that did happen to me. The end result was my whole strategy of trying to eliminate and then figure out, that resulted in a failure, period. So any area that you're struggling in, go back and be solid. The better your foundation now, the better it's going to be throughout your aviation journey. Once you know this stuff, I can tell you, you know it. And rather than trying to figure it out, it's just going to make you, have a bad day and you're going to fail. And you don't want to fail. Last but not least, the third point or the third piece of advice I'd give is that you should practice, practice, practice. I will tell you, the first time I took the written exam, I had not practiced a lot of questions. Yes, I did a couple practice exams and I did a couple of them full length. I think one, I got like a 78. The other one, I got like a 80 or something like that. But it was 2 different practice exams and I did them probably like 3 weeks apart, and I just didn't have a lot of practice under my belt. And so, you know the drill. I went in with that very little bit of practice under my belt. I went in, took that exam, 67% failed. Bottom line. So my CFI and I came up with this plan, and actually he suggested it, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to pull this off, but we came up with this practice goal that I would practice the questions so that I would know how the questions were being asked, because I knew the material. He knew I knew the material. I knew I knew the material. The issue was, how is the material being tested on the exam? What is the construction of the question that gets to that knowledge of that particular skill set? And so my CFI came up with this goal that I would practice the questions and I would have 3 consecutive exams where I would get a 90 or above. Now, of course, yes, that was crazy. The first time I heard it, I was tripping too. I got it. I get it. You might not want that same goal, but that was the goal that he set for me. And so I went about my business of shoring up my VFR cloud clearances, understanding weight and balance ad nauseum, and practicing the questions as well. And so the result was, I did end up getting 3 consecutive practice exams where I got a 90 or above. What was the result of that practice? The result was I got a 92 on my written exam and I passed. So it may seem like that was overkill to do that, but at the end of the day, it prepared me for the exam. And for me, that worked. Now, for you, you might not have to do 3 consecutive exams. Maybe you just do 1 or 2 or whatever. But one of the things I will say is that don't think that because you may have this photographic memory and you know all about this stuff, that you understand how these questions are being formulated. Because sometimes, in my opinion, there's a few of them that were like poorly worded. It was like one of those things where like, well, it depends, because the way in which they worded the question was kind of wonky. So it could have resulted in an answer that could have been correct if one interpreted the question the way one could have. The issue is, it's not about what you can interpret, it's just about the way they want to test it's not about how you interpret it, it's how they want you to understand the question to get the answer that is correct. And so that's why practicing the questions are very important. So I implore you, you will be doing yourself a huge favor if you basically put yourself in a situation where you're shoring up the weak parts of your knowledge base and you are practicing those questions. So that's really it. And you know, I wanted to try to keep this video as short as possible. I think those are the 3 keys. That was definitely the 3 things that made the difference between my failure, which really sucked, and passing, which was really awesome. And so those are the things that I would impart upon folks that are trying to figure out how to approach this exam. Certainly, if you have any other additional questions, hit me up in the comments, you know, and I will definitely respond. I try to respond to all the comments on these videos because the whole point is, if you take the time to watch and interact, I should at least follow back with a reply or additional information if people request it. So thank you to the brother who asked the question about the written exam and the debrief. You got this. It is not insurmountable. And as you can see, I went from a 67% to a 92%. And those 3 things that I just talked about in this video are things that I definitely did that got me from the fail to the pass. All right, so that's it. If you have any questions, hit me up in the comments. Thank you for joining me on this crazy journey. Man, I love aviation. This stuff is just awesome. All right, so Russ Kid, Russ can fly. Take care, and I'll see you later. Peace.